The morning Joseph Barrett arrived at the inn 2 years before any of this happened, Dorothea Wren had pressed the guest registry into her hands and said, with a smile that showed most of her teeth, that a good attendant was like a good lock. You never noticed it when it was working. Joseph had taken that as the employment was offered, with a nod and a quiet thank you, and had gone to work. She still had not decided whether it had been a compliment. The Mallard Inn sat at the wide end of a narrow lake road. 14 rooms arranged in a horseshoe around a central lobby that smelled of beeswax and cut cedar. In winter, the lake showed through the tall west-facing windows as a flat grey disk, and the bare birch trees at the water's edge clicked and shivered in every passing wind. In the warmer months, the property was easier to love. Guests arrived on Friday afternoons with luggage too large for the rooms and stood in the lobby breathing audibly, as if the air itself were part of what they had paid for, which perhaps it was. Joseph checked them in, carried what they could not carry, turned down beds in the evenings and kept track of the small mechanical ailments the building collected, the way old places collect them, a sticking latch here, a radiator that whistled after midnight there, a window in room 11 that required a specific inward nudge before it would seat properly against its frame. She was good at the work. She knew she was. She did not require Dorothea to confirm it, which was fortunate because Dorothea generally did not. The inn kept 14 rooms, and at its crown, on the second floor at the north end of the horseshoe, was the room called the Lakeview Suite. $300 a night, which was nearly 4 times the rate of the smallest room on the lower floor. It had its own sitting area, a clawfoot tub, and windows that looked directly out over the water, unobstructed, so that on clear mornings the light came in low and honey-coloured and lay across the floor in long, warm rectangles. Joseph had cleaned and prepared that room dozens of times. She knew where the towels folded sharpest, which drawer stuck unless you lifted slightly as you pulled, how far to draw the curtains so the light was right, without being blinding. She had been assigned as the suite's primary attendant for 3 weeks running when Marcus Webb called ahead to reserve a room for the following Friday. She was not there for the phone call. She was upstairs rehanging the curtain rod in room 7, which had come free of its left bracket again. Clara Finch, who kept the linen closet and knew every room's particular complaints as well as Joseph did, told her afterward that Dorothea had taken the call herself, that Marcus had asked for the best available room, and that his name had produced in Dorothea a visible change of affect, something between recognition and eagerness, the way a person looks when they are calculating quickly and find the number pleasing. Marcus Webb was not famous. He was, Clara explained with a dry patience that suggested she had observed the type before, the sort of man whose money was very slightly older than most of the money in any room he entered, and who expected that fact to be legible in the way people spoke to him. He had stayed at the inn once before, 3 years prior, before Joseph's time, and apparently the occasion had been satisfactory enough that Dorothea still mentioned it at the quarterly review, as though it were an accomplishment. Joseph heard all of this in the linen closet, leaning against the shelf that held the extra pillow covers, while Clara folded a fitted sheet with the efficiency of someone who had folded thousands and expected to fold thousands more. She did not think much of it then. She returned to room 7, seated the curtain rod's left bracket properly, and went on with the afternoon. The reassignment happened on Thursday, the day before Marcus was due to arrive. Dorothea called her to the front desk just before the noon hour. 2 guests were checking out at the far end of the lobby, handling their own luggage and talking loudly about traffic, and a woman Joseph didn't recognize was seated near the window reading a paperback novel. So it was not a private conversation, but it was not exactly a public one either. It occupied the uncomfortable middle, audible to anyone paying attention. Dorothea had the room ledger open in front of her and had already drawn a line through Joseph's name in the suite column. Joseph saw that before Dorothea spoke. The line was clean and unhesitating. "I'm reassigning the Lakeview suite to direct management for Mr. Webb's stay," Dorothea said. She did not look up from the ledger. "You'll be on the lower floor rooms for the weekend, 6 through 9. "All right," Joseph said. "Mr. Webb requires particular attention. The suite should be prepared by 3 tomorrow." "I can prepare it by 3, Joseph said. Dorothea looked up then, briefly, with the expression of someone who has already moved past the point they are currently discussing. "I'll be handling the suite personally this weekend. You prepare 6 through 9. There it was, not just reassignment, but removal. Joseph understood that the difference was deliberate. "Of course," she said. Her voice came out level, which she was grateful for because the rest of her was doing something slightly different. She walked back through the lobby at the ordinary pace of someone going about ordinary business. The woman with the paperback did not look up. The guests at the far end were still talking about traffic. Joseph took the short hallway to the housekeeping station, collected the afternoon supply cart, and spent the next 2 hours preparing rooms 6 through 9 with the same care she would have given anything else in the building she was responsible for, tucking the bottom sheet's corners with the same downward angle she always used, setting the courtesy soaps at the same 45-degree position on the same side of the basin, lifting the window in room 8 with the same two-handed upward push it required because the lower sash had swollen slightly last autumn and had never fully released. She did not mention the reassignment to Clara. Clara noticed anyway. "She did it in the lobby," Clara said. "It was not a question." "It was fine," Joseph said. Clara made a sound that expressed a complete opinion without using any particular word. Marcus arrived the next day at 2:15, when the lobby was at its fullest, which Joseph suspected was not coincidental. He was not unkind exactly, only confident in the specific way of people who have rarely been told the room was not available. He shook Dorothea's hand and let her take his coat and stood at the center of the lobby's flagstone floor, as though he had calculated the precise position from which the room showed to best advantage, which possibly he had. Dorothea moved around him with a careful attentiveness, almost ceremonial. She pointed out the west windows, the view of the lake, the historic photograph above the fireplace. Marcus nodded at each detail with the judicious expression of an expert confirming what he already knew. Joseph was at the far corner of the reception desk, working through Friday's checkout list. She watched none of it directly. She was aware of it the way you are aware of weather. Nate Calloway arrived 40 minutes later. He came through the front door with a single bag, the soft-sided kind with worn leather handles that suggested the bag was older than most of the luggage in the building. He was not remarkable to look at, which is not the same as saying he was unremarkable. He wore a grey wool jacket over a plain collar shirt, the jacket a good weight for the weather but with no particular insignia or label that announced itself. He had the kind of physical stillness that suggested the habit of self-possession rather than any calculated performance of it. He stood at the reception desk and waited, without pulling out a phone, without adjusting his bag, without performing the small impatiences people perform when they feel they have been made to wait. Joseph was the one at the desk. She came to him directly. "Welcome in," she said. "Do you have a reservation?" "I called this morning," he said. "Calloway." She found the name in the system. 1 night, possibly 2. He had asked for the smallest available room when he'd called, which had struck her briefly as unusual when she'd taken the note, since most guests arriving alone asked for the best available or at least the most comfortable. "That would be room 2, she said. "Lower floor, north end, $80 a night. It's a smaller room, closer to the service hall. I want to make sure that's what you were expecting." "It is," he said. "All right." She printed the slip and slid it across the desk. I can show you up, or I can give you the quick version and let you find it yourself, whichever you prefer. He looked at her for a moment, the way a person looks when they are deciding whether a question is genuine. Apparently he decided it was. Quick version, he said. She told him. Down the hall past the housekeeping station, left at the fire door, room 2 was the last door on the right. The window faced the service yard rather than the lake, but it was quiet. The radiator made some noise after 10 at night, but settled around midnight. The breakfast room opened at 7. The radiator, he said. It's a particular sound, not alarming once you know what it is. What is it? Thermal expansion in the supply pipe. The building's old enough that the pipes move when the temperature drops overnight. Once it settles, you won't hear it. He nodded once with the expression of someone who has filed the information and considers the matter closed. He picked up his bag. Thank you, he said. It was 2 words, said plainly, but said to her face, which she noticed because she was used to hearing it, said to the space slightly above her head. He carried his own bag down the hall. Dorothea did not acknowledge his arrival. She was deep in conversation with Marcus by the fireplace, presenting the weekend's planned dinner arrangements with the careful attention of a person managing an important diplomatic event. Joseph returned to the checkout list. She did not see Nate again until the following morning, when she brought a carafe of fresh coffee to the breakfast room at 7:15 and found him already there, at the table nearest the east window, with a cup in front of him and nothing else. No phone, no papers. He was looking out at the birch trees at the edge of the service road, where a slight frost still remained on the north-facing bark in the places the morning light had not yet reached. She set the carafe on the sideboard and asked if he needed anything. He said the coffee he had was fine, and thank you. She set out the small basket of wrapped preserves that went on each table in the morning, and when she set it on his table, he looked at it briefly, then up at her. Do people eat these? He said. The orange marmalade goes quickly, she said. The rest of them make it to checkout mostly intact. Something in his expression shifted very slightly, a private recognition of something she couldn't read. He reached into the basket and took the marmalade. She went to set the remaining tables and did not think about it further. The trouble came that afternoon. She had been filling the soap dispensers in the lower floor bathrooms, working her way methodically from room 6 toward room 9, when Dorothea appeared at the end of the hallway with Marcus a half step behind her, both of them coming from the direction of the stairs. They had apparently been touring some feature of the second floor. Dorothea was still in the middle of a sentence about the suite's original woodwork, gesturing slightly with one hand, and she saw Joseph at the same moment Joseph saw her. Joseph, she said, changing direction without breaking the sentence's rhythm. When you finish the dispensers, Mr. Webb's car needs to be moved to the east lot. The front spots are reserved for afternoon arrivals. Marcus had not asked for this. Joseph could see that from his expression, which was the expression of someone who had not thought about their car in several hours, and was mildly surprised to find it had become relevant. Of course, Joseph said, and the display table in the lobby needs fresh greenery. The arrangement is looking tired. I'll see to it. Dorothea resumed walking, Marcus following, and the conversation about the woodwork resumed seamlessly. Joseph went back to the soap dispenser. She heard Marcus say, behind her, something about the original tin ceilings, and Dorothea's answer came warm and informed and carefully attentive, the voice she used when she was performing the inn rather than managing it. Joseph moved the car. She replaced the lobby greenery with a fresh arrangement from the stockroom, which smelled of cut cedar and damp stems, and looked appreciably better than the dried-out one she removed. She spent 20 minutes on it, getting the proportions right because it was going to be in the lobby for the next several days, and she preferred to do it once correctly. Nate came through the lobby while she was finishing the arrangement. He stopped, looked at it, and then looked at her. "That's better than the other one," he said. "The other one was past its week," she said. He nodded and went on toward the breakfast room, where the afternoon coffee service ran until 4. She tucked the last stem into place and stepped back, and agreed with herself that it was better. The overheard conversation happened that evening. Joseph had finished her shift and was cutting through the short corridor that connected the housekeeping station to the back stair when she heard Dorothea's voice coming through the ventilation grate that served both the small office behind the reception desk and the corridor itself. The office door must have been open, and the sound was carrying through the duct in the particular way it sometimes did when the pressure was right, and the building was otherwise quiet. She was not listening. She was walking through a corridor she walked through every day at the end of her shift. Dorothea was saying, "She's adequate, but adequate is not what I'm building toward here. Before the season ends, I'm restructuring the attendant positions. She'll be one of the ones let go." Marcus said something, low enough that it did not carry. Dorothea said, 6 weeks at most. It's a kindness, really, giving her that much notice. She's not suited for what we're trying to become. Joseph stood in the corridor. The ventilation grate was a square of painted metal at knee height, and the corridor was narrow and smelled of plaster and the faint cold of the outside wall. She stood there for a moment that felt longer than a moment, listening to the building settle around her, the particular small creak that came from the floorboard at the base of the north stair. 6 weeks. She had been at the inn for 2 years. She knew every room's requirements, every window's precise behavior, every radiator's particular pattern of noise. She knew the checkout list and the seasonal supply order, and the name of the family in the photograph above the fireplace, which she had looked up once out of simple curiosity, because no one else had apparently thought to. She knew that the east lot drainage backed up after heavy rain, and that the fix was to clear the grate before the storm rather than after. She had told Dorothea this once in writing, and Dorothea had thanked her, and the east lot had flooded twice since then. She stood in the corridor until the voices in the office moved on to something else. Then she walked up the back stair to collect her coat from the break room. The break room was a small, square space at the top of the back stair, with 4 chairs, a round table, a basin, and a window that looked out over the service road and the frost-edged birch trees. It was a staff room, plainly so, with a board on one wall where the weekly schedule was posted, and a hook rack below it for coats and aprons. The coffee machine on the table was old and ran slowly, but ran well. Nate was there. He was sitting in the chair nearest the window with his jacket still on, hands around a cup, looking out at the birch trees in the way she had seen him look at them from the breakfast room that morning. He turned when she came in, and his expression was the unperturbed expression of a person who has been somewhere long enough to feel entitled to it, except that he had no particular entitlement here, and the expression suggested he knew that. "The breakfast room's closed," he said, not as an excuse, only as an explanation. "I wasn't sure where else was warm." She should have told him the break room was staff only. That was the clear and simple policy. She looked at him, at the cup in his hands, at the window behind him where the last of the daylight was thinning to a pale grey, and she said, "It's fine. There's coffee if you want more." He looked at the cup. "I'm all right." She took her coat from the hook and stood for a moment, not quite ready to leave. The room was warm in the way small rooms are warm, gathered and close. Outside, the birch trees had gone colourless in the fading light. "The radiator settled," she said. "Around midnight," he said. "You were right about that. It always does." She put her coat on. He turned back to the window. She was at the door when she said, over her shoulder, "If you want to come here in the evenings, you can. It's usually empty after 7. No one will say anything." He was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," he said. She went down the back stair and out to the east lot and drove home in the dark. And the thing Dorothea had said in the office sat in the back of her mind the entire way. Not sharp exactly, not acute but present, the way a small stone is present in a shoe. 6 weeks. She did not alter anything about how she worked the next morning. She made up rooms 6 through 9 with the same unhurried care she had given them all week, folding the towels at the same angle, restocking the small notepads beside each telephone, checking the window in room 8's lower sash, which still required the two-handed lift. She replaced the courtesy soaps in room 6 with a fresh set, because the prior ones had been partially unwrapped by the previous guest, and she preferred to start fresh rather than present something used. She passed Marcus in the upstairs corridor that morning. He was coming from the direction of the Lakeview suite in a pressed shirt and the leisure of a man whose plans for the morning involved nothing that could not be delayed. He did not speak to her. He did not exactly look at her. She moved the supply cart a few inches to her left to clear the corridor, and he walked through the space she had made, and that was the whole of their exchange. She found Clara in the linen closet, and they worked together for a while in the comfortable silence they had developed over 2 years. Clara folding, Joseph stacking, the smell of clean cotton filling the small space. "He asked Dorothea about you this morning," Clara said eventually. Joseph set down a towel. "Marcus?" "The other one, Calloway. He asked who was responsible for room 2. Clara's hands continued moving, fold over fold. "Dorothea told him you were on the lower floor rooms this weekend. She managed to make it sound like a reassignment downward." Joseph picked up the towel again. "What did he say?" "Nothing," he just nodded. Clara set a folded sheet on the pile with the precise satisfaction of work completed. But the way he nodded. Joseph was quiet. "What way?" she said. Clara considered. "Like someone writing something down in their head." Joseph did not know what to do with that, so she set it aside and went back to work. He came to the break room again that evening, as she had said he could. She was there when he arrived, at the table with a cup of tea and the weekly checkout list she was reviewing for the following morning. He took the same chair he had taken the previous evening, the one by the window, and poured himself coffee from the machine, which ran slowly and produced a sound of mild mechanical effort before delivering its result. They sat in the same room without speaking for a while, which was not uncomfortable. The schedule board on the wall showed next week's assignments. Her name was on it twice, Monday and Wednesday, lower floor rooms. Not the suite for the rest of the month she could see, though she had not been formally told. "You've worked here a while," he said. Not a question exactly. 2 years, she said. He nodded, looking at the window. "What's the turnover like?" "High," she said. "Attendants usually stay 1 season, sometimes 2. The work is consistent, but the pay doesn't change much, and Dorothea manages by visibility rather than recognition, which makes people feel optional after a while." She had not planned to say that much. The words had come out as though they were simply descriptive, which perhaps they were. He looked at her for a moment. "Does it make you feel optional?" he said. She thought about the corridor and the ventilation grate, and the phrase, "adequate is not what I'm building toward." "Not until recently," she said. He did not press further. She respected that. He turned back to the window and she returned to the checkout list, and the coffee machine made its slow mechanical sounds, and outside the frost was returning to the birch trees, the way it did every evening at this time of year. After a while he said, "What's the photograph above the fireplace? The family in it?" "The Whitmore family," she said. "They built the inn in 1903, 3 generations. The last of them sold it in the 80s. She paused. "No one here actually knows that except me. And now, you." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Why do you know it?" "Because it's in the building," she said. "It seemed worth knowing." He looked at her with an expression that was not quite what she expected, though she could not have said precisely what she expected. "It is," he said. She went home that night feeling, oddly, marginally less like the floor had shifted beneath her. Not because anything had changed. Nothing had changed. She was still 6 weeks from a termination she had not been told about directly. She still ran rooms 6 through 9 while someone else managed the suite she had spent 2 years learning. The stone was still in the shoe. She simply felt, marginally, that someone else was aware of the room she was in, and that awareness, however slight, made the room feel less sealed. Nate's assistant arrived on Sunday morning just before 11. The lobby was at its weekend fullness, 2 families from Friday still finishing their stays, a couple checking out near the desk with their luggage piled in an impractical arrangement, and Marcus in the sitting area near the fireplace with a newspaper and the studied composure of a man who considered public spaces to be extensions of whatever room he was currently occupying. Dorothea was behind the desk, managing the morning's checkouts with the smooth efficiency she reserved for the times when being observed was most likely. The assistant came through the front door at a pace that was not quite hurried and stopped at the desk, bypassing the small queue of outgoing guests with a practiced directness that was not quite rude, but was entirely certain of its own priority. He was a young man, early 30s in a dark jacket carrying a leather folio. He spoke to Dorothea. "I'm looking for Nathan Calloway," he said. "He's a guest here." Dorothea consulted the system. "Mr. Calloway in room 2, she said, and her voice had the courteous but distracted tone of someone managing several things at once. The assistant glanced at the folio, then back up. "Yes, is he available? I'll call the room." She reached for the house phone. "Actually," the assistant said, and his voice carried the mild, apologetic firmness of someone who is about to say something that will change the room's temperature, "I should probably clarify who I'm looking for. Nathan Calloway, as in Nathan Calloway of Calloway Holdings." Dorothea's hand was still on the house phone. The assistant continued. "The holding company owns this property. He's been traveling incognito. He does that occasionally to assess operations without affecting the staff's natural behavior." The assistant paused. "He asked me to come and collect some documents and to let the management know he'd be in touch about the property review." The lobby had not gone silent exactly. The couple at the checkout continued sorting their luggage. One of the children from the family near the window was asking about something in a persistent undertone. The fire in the grate made its small, unchanged sounds. Dorothea had not moved. Joseph was at the far end of the reception desk, where she had been since 9, handling the morning's room status updates on the secondary screen. She was aware of the conversation in the way she had been aware of Marcus's arrival 3 days prior, peripherally, through the corner of her attention. Then the assistant said the words, "Calloway Holdings," and something in her understanding of the last 3 days rearranged itself quietly and completely. The owner. She looked at the hallway that led to the back stair, to the break room at the top of it, to the chair by the window where a man had sat 2 evenings in a row drinking coffee he had poured himself from the slow machine. And she felt something she could not have named precisely, except that it was not surprise, or not entirely surprise, mixed with something warmer and more unsteady. Nate came through from the direction of the back hallway at that moment, which meant he had probably heard some part of the conversation before he appeared, or had been expecting the assistant to arrive. He had his jacket on and his worn bag over one shoulder. He looked, as he had looked every time she had seen him, entirely unremarkable in his appearance, and entirely in possession of whatever room he was currently in. He nodded to his assistant, then looked at Dorothea. Dorothea's expression was doing several things at once that her expression was not accustomed to doing. The careful social management that characterized her face in most professional situations had developed a number of competing instructions and was not resolving them smoothly. "Mr. Calloway," she said. "Ms. Wren," he said. His voice was the same measured, unadorned voice it had been for 3 days. "I wasn't aware." She stopped, started again. "We would have prepared the suite. You should have had the Lakeview suite, of course. I would have arranged it personally." "I asked for the smallest room," he said. "I usually do." Dorothea opened her mouth and closed it again. Marcus had set down his newspaper. He was watching from the sitting area with the expression of someone who has abruptly realized that the hierarchy of the room is not what he calculated it to be. Nate did not look at Marcus. He looked at Dorothea. "I'd like to talk about the staff structure before I leave," he said. "I have observations about this weekend's operation. We can do it now, or I can have my office schedule a formal call next week." Dorothea said, "Now is fine, of course." Her voice had shed its performance. What was left was smaller and more careful. "Good." He glanced toward the end of the reception desk where Joseph had not moved. "I'd also like it noted that the attendant on the lower floor rooms this weekend was the best prepared and most capable staff member I observed during my stay." The lobby continued its ordinary sounds. The fire, the children, the luggage wheels on the flagstone floor. "Her name," he said, "is Joseph Barrett. She's been here 2 years, which is long for your turnover rate, and she should not be on a list of positions to eliminate." Dorothea's face did something very still. "She mentioned to you," Dorothea began. "She mentioned nothing," he said. "She told me about the Whitmore family and a radiator pipe. Everything else I observed." He paused. "The break room, the greenery arrangement, the way she handled the reassignment on Thursday." He had seen all of it. Joseph understood, standing at the end of the reception desk, that this was the precise shape of what Clara had said, like someone writing something down in their head. She had been seen the way she had always simply gone about her work, with no performance and no audience in mind, or what she had believed to be no audience. She had been wrong about the audience. She had been entirely wrong about the audience, in the most specific and particular way possible, and standing in the lobby in the plain light of a Sunday morning, she found that she was not certain how to carry that weight yet. She held the edge of the reception desk and was grateful for its solidity. Marcus rose from the sitting area and said something to Nate about having heard the name Calloway in connection with the Northern Resort project, his voice taking on the warm, engaged quality of a person recalibrating for an important conversation. Nate heard him out with the patience of someone who has very limited interest in what is being said, but will not be rude about it. His reply was brief and did not invite continuation. Marcus sat back down. Dorothea said, "Mr. Calloway, I want to assure you that Joseph's work has always been valued here." He looked at her for a moment without speaking. "Let's go over the staff review," he said. "Is there a room where we can sit?" She brought him to the office behind the reception desk, the same office where the ventilation grate carried voices through the plaster into the housekeeping corridor. The door closed. Clara, who had come to stand near the linen closet doorway when the lobby's tenor had changed, caught Joseph's eye across the lobby with an expression that contained an entire conversation. Joseph went back to the room's status screen. Her hands were steady. The screen showed the current checkout list. The room's still occupied. The room's due for preparation before 2 o'clock. Room 2 needed to be stripped and remade. She added it to her list, then took it off again, because she did not know whether Nate was staying another night, and she was not going to assume. She would ask. She found him in the short hallway outside the office door, 20 minutes later, when Dorothea's consultation apparently concluded and she remained inside. He had his bag, his jacket, his assistant standing a few feet behind him, with the folio. "Are you staying another night?" she said. He looked at her with the expression she had come to recognize over 3 days, the one that suggested a decision had already been made and he was simply finding the right number of words for it. "I hadn't planned to," he said. She nodded. "I'll get room 2 ready for the next guest." He was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to finish the conversation we were having," he said, "about what the building's worth knowing." It took her a moment. The Whitmore family, the photograph above the fireplace. She looked at him standing in the short hallway with his bag, no longer the ordinary traveller in room 2, and not yet whatever he was going to be, still carrying himself with the same unhurried stillness that had characterized every room she had observed him in. "There's quite a lot more of it," she said. "I expect there is," he said. The assistant made a small sound of professional restraint. Nate glanced at him. "Wednesday," he said to Joseph. "My office can arrange a meeting to go through the property in detail. I'd want someone who knows its particulars." He said it with the directness of a man making a practical arrangement and the steadiness of someone who means something slightly larger than the practical arrangement. "All right," she said. "Wednesday." He nodded and picked up his bag and walked through the lobby toward the front door, past the fireplace and the Whitmore photograph and the fresh greenery arrangement at the display table. Past the window with its view of the birch trees and the flat grey disk of the lake in the winter light. The front door opened. Cold air came through in a brief, sharp wave, the way it always did when the door unsealed against its frame. Then it closed again, and the lobby was warm and ordinary and full of its own quiet sounds. Dorothea came out of the office 20 minutes later. She had reorganized herself, which was visible in the careful composure of her expression, though the reorganization had not been entirely complete, and something slightly different remained at the edges of it, a quality of attention that had not been there before Sunday morning, the quality of a person who has recalibrated what they are looking at. She came to the reception desk where Joseph was working. "The room assignments for next weekend," Dorothea said. Her voice was steady and professional. "I'd like you back on the full rotation, including the suite." Joseph looked at the schedule on the secondary screen. She did not say anything immediately. "All right," she said. It was what she would have said regardless. It was always what she would have said. She knew the suite. She knew every drawer and window and folded corner of it. She had not stopped knowing it because she had been removed from it, and she would not now perform a changed relationship to the work simply because the circumstances had shifted. The work was what it had always been. Dorothea withdrew to the office again. Clara appeared at the end of the desk with the expression of someone who has been waiting patiently for the moment when they could say what they were thinking. "She put you back on the suite," Clara said. "She did." "Callaway Holdings." Clara said it the way a person tastes something they have been expecting to find in a dish and are confirmed to find there. Joseph said. 2 years, Clara said. "You've been here 2 years making sure the east lot grate is clear before the storm and rehanging the curtain rod in room 7 every time it comes free." "It's the left bracket," Joseph said. "The anchor bolt is stripped. It needs to be replaced, not rehung." Clara looked at her for a moment with a warmth that did not require any particular expression. "You should tell him that," she said, "on Wednesday." Joseph added it to her mental list, which had always been longer than anyone around her had known to look for. The lobby at midday on Sunday held all its ordinary light, the flat winter light that came through the west windows and lay across the flagstone floor in pale, diffuse shapes, not the honey-coloured rectangles of morning, but something closer to silver. The fire had settled to a steady, low burn. The last of the weekend guests were finishing their checkouts, hauling bags toward the door, trading the particular small pleasantries of departure. Joseph stood at the reception desk and handed a receipt to a couple who were the last in line, and answered a question about the best road out to the highway, and watched them go. The lobby emptied down to its furniture and its light and its fire, and the photograph above the mantel. The Whitmore family in their stiff, formal postures. 3 generations of people who had built a thing worth building and then let it go, not knowing, probably, what it would become or who would understand it. Clara had gone back to the linen closet. Linen. The schedule board at the end of the hall showed next week. Joseph's name was on it in the full rotation. She picked up the house phone and called room 2's line to confirm checkout because that was what you did. No one answered. She marked it on the screen as vacated and added it to the afternoon preparation queue and went to get the cart, because room 2 needed fresh sheets and the particular small attentions that every room in the building deserved, and she would give it those things with the same care she gave everything else, and it would be done correctly, and the next person to sleep there would find it clean and warm and ready. She paused at the end of the hall, cart handle in both hands, and looked back at the lobby once. The greenery on the display table held its arrangement, the proportions right, the stems fresh, the cedar smell still faint in the warm air. The fire made its small, constant sound. The Whitmore photograph watched the room with its century-old patience. She had been in this building for 2 years. She knew it down to its left brackets and its stripped anchor bolts and the particular pipe that sang after midnight and settled before morning. She had been seen knowing it. She turned the cart and went down the hall to do the work.